1957 movie review, Paths of Glory. This is number 2 in my top 10. It's directed and written by Stanley Kubrick, screenwriters Jim Thompson, and it's from a novel by Humphrey Cobb, cinematography by George Krause, and the cast: Kirk Douglas in the leading role as Colonel Dax. Ralph Meeker plays Corporal Paris. Adolfo Menjur plays General George Brulard. George Macready is General Paul Moreau. Wayne Morris plays Lieutenant Roger. Joe Turkel is Private Anu. Ken Dibbs plays Private Lejeune, and Private Farrell is played by Timothy Carey. Other notables: the German singer is played by Christiane Kubrick, and the priest by Emil Meyer. And a very short film, 86 minutes, and it was the first really well-funded film that Kubrick was responsible for. His previous two efforts, he basically made the movie on a shoestring, but he was well funded on this one, largely due to the presence of Kirk Douglas, who was a huge movie star and was very committed to the project. And although they didn't always see eye to eye on the set, he was very committed to this idea of doing a movie about the First World War. Some historical background then. The movie starts off with a narration explaining the historical perspective on the World War One, starting in 1914, and we arrive at a point 2 years in where the French and German armies are camped in after 2 years of slaughter, which has achieved very little reward in terms of advancing their forces. They are put in the trenches, and their ability to make any progress is virtually a matter of yards. And this stalemate has been going on for 2 years, and we reach a point where we then meet the French generals in some salubrious palace, who are discussing what they ought to do about it. And Brulard basically presents the political picture to Moreau, that they must lead an assault on the anthill, which is the position held by the Germans in this part of France. And Moreau, immediate reaction is to say that this could be impossible, is impossible to achieve. And however, Brulard dangles a sort of promotion in front of him as a carrot, and Moreau agrees to the assault on the hill the following morning. We then move on to Moreau's discussion with Dax, and a very similar conversation takes place at the start, with Dax pleading with the general that any idea of making any progress through an assault would only lead to a massive loss of life and absolutely no chance of success. Now, in contrast to the first discussion, Moreau tries to undermine Dax's credibility, suggesting that he may well be overtired, and threatens to withdraw his command. Dax's loyalty to his men provokes his reaction and saying that he will attempt to carry out the order of getting the anthill under French command, even though he realizes that this is a fruitless task. So there we are. We have the basic groundwork laid out as to what is going to happen next. The film then moves to the front line, and we witness first Moreau visiting the front line, looking at no man's land and making statements to the effect that he's seen far worse positions and that it should be well within the capabilities of the men to take the anthill. We then get a period where a surveillance team goes out the night before to check on the positions of the Germans. 3 men, they include Private Lejeune, Private Arnoux, and Lieutenant Roger. And it quickly becomes evident, even though it's pitch black, that they're walking into hell on earth. And Roger hangs back, allowing the other 2 to go ahead, and he basically retreats to the trench, and Lejeune is lost, assumed dead, as Arnoux returns in haste under a hail of bullets. This scene is quite significant in terms of what happens further down the line. We then get to the day of the assault, and there's some tremendous footage of Dax walking through the trenches, trying to get the morale up of the men before they charge on the position. The camera follows Dax, and of course he then signals the advance through the whistle. But it's some tremendous footage by Kirk Kubrick, and one of the high moments of the movie. Once the assault starts, within minutes, and the footage of the actual charge is absolutely outstanding in terms of cinematography, but absolutely desolate in terms of how quickly the troops are cut down in a hail of artillery from the Germans, and it's brutal to say the least. And within a short period of time, some of the men start to retreat, as does Dax, and escape, although the losses are immense. Whilst they are involved in this assault, Moreau is viewing the activity from the safety, and he witnessing what he sees as cowardice. He then issues instructions to another part of the battalion, the second wave, to start firing on his own men. This leads to the corporal refusing to do that on the basis that he must receive it in writing. What then follows is the attack is clearly a disaster, and Moreau issues an order to interview Dax about the defeat. What follows next is the meeting between Dax and Moreau, where Moreau is lambasting the fact that the troops didn't fight and ran off, Dax defends them based on the position, which was hopeless, and we then get towards a discussion with the senior members of staff regarding how many people will be sacrificed via a court-martial. It starts off at hundreds and eventually comes down to three. Three are chosen. One is chosen because he's considered an undesirable. That is Farrell, Private Farrell. Arnaud is chosen because he unfortunately picked the wrong lot, and Paris is chosen by Roger because Paris witnessed the loss on the reconnaissance of the said soldier. So these three are selected to go for the court-martial. Dax insists, because of his legal training, to be their representative, and it's held in a salubrious palace, and it becomes a complete farce as the military court is unwilling to hear any evidence that regarding the three individuals. The facts are distorted, and it's clearly a sham, and the three men are found guilty of the offence of cowardice in the face of the enemy. We then move forth to the debate about how these men want to die. It's a very, very intriguing part of the movie as we listen to two discussing should it be from a bayonet or from a machine gun, and it indicates the state of mind of these people. Now, the three men are placed in a cell the night before the execution, and what takes place is a priest arrives, and this provokes outrage from one of the three. Paris is exceedingly agitated at how the priest assumes that they're all going to fall into line with regard to religious belief, and he ends up having a confrontation with Arnaud, and what then happens is that one of them has to be carried out on a stretcher following a fractured skull following the assault. So this is another aspect that I will refer to again as we get to the actual execution. I did find one particular scene very illuminating when two of them were discussing the fact that death was imminent, and it involved them seeing one of them seeing a cockroach and saying that cockroach is going to be alive in the morning and will be able to be a part of my family's life, and at which point Farrell actually crushes the cockroach and says, well, at least you're better off at the moment than the cockroach. And this I found very tragic. Lieutenant Roger is selected by Dax to be responsible and coordinate the execution by firing squad, and he's very reluctant to do this, but he's ordered. Of course, Roger, responsible for selecting Paris, wanting to eliminate him in case there's any future problems about his behaviour on the reconnaissance patrol. The Arnoux is brought out on the stretcher along with the other two, and we witness the firing squad, and it's quite graphic to say the least. We then shift to a meeting that Dax has with the senior colonel, Colonel Bourlard, where Dax divulges to him the incident regarding him, Miro instructing an officer to order the troops to fire on their own men, and Bourlard takes on board this information, and it's clear that later he then basically demotes Miro, and justice as such is carried out to a limited extent. We then reach the final episode where Dax, leaving the general, he then comes across this bar, and we witness French troops in there getting drunk by the minute, and the final scene where the young German waif sings this song to the troops, this famous song, The Little Hussar, which is in complete contrast, of course, to the music that opens the movie, which is the French national anthem, the Marseillaise. And it's an absolutely riveting conclusion, because it brings the French troops in the bar to tears, and then we get the final credit. So basically, what have we got? Well, this movie sends us on a journey into the politics of war, but maybe more importantly enables us to see the way that Kubrick was going to revolutionise cinema, to try to decipher the simple message of the futility of war and how the elite make decisions to sacrifice soldiers at the front is in itself provocative for its time. This was the 1957. But the final sequence, when the squaddies hoot and taunt and verbally abuse the young German waif as she's presented to the loyal French soldier as a symbol of entertainment, when day in, day out they have been constantly woken up with the image that all things German are to be destroyed. Well, this is a message that reflects Kubrick's message regarding how he views war. Okay, we can spend time analysing the obscenity of the court-martial and how the absurd notion that this will galvanise the troops on the front line to fight harder. But as a war film, it stands the test of time, and clearly we can see where Kubrick moved on to with Full Metal Jacket. Douglas is a tour de force, showing us the contrast in loyalty to his troops and his sincerity in fighting with what he believes to be true, contrasted with his repugnancy at the senior elite's lack of insight. And some of the footage is quite remarkable. The walk through the trenches before he blows the whistle, the hopeless claws And this is clearly used again by Malik in A Thin Red Line. It's also remarkable that the firing squad scenes presented so viciously for its time, as one of the accused is positioned on a stretcher so he can receive his just penalty. This movie laid down a benchmark for the genre, following the indulgent hero war movies after the Second World War that epitomised post-war Hollywood. And it really did change the whole perspective of how we view war in cinema. Thank you very much, Stanley Kubrick.